Welcome to the deep dive. Today we are getting into a subject that, well, everyone talks about, but very few people really understand how to practice it day to day: leadership.
Hmm.
And specifically, our focus is on this idea of leadership beyond position, how
Hmm.
ordinary people create extraordinary impact.
And this deep dive is a little different because our source material, it isn't the usual academic papers or, CEO memoirs.
Right.
It's a comprehensive framework. Really, it's a collection of reflection tools, discussion questions, exercises, and these super practical to-do lists.
So it's designed to be a shortcut.
It is. The whole point is to take these big abstract ideas about leadership and just forge them into concrete daily habits.
And that really is the mission for you, the listener. We want to cut through all the noise and just synthesize the most practical, the most challenging, and honestly, the most uncomfortable questions this framework is going to ask you.
I'm skipping the job.
Totally. It's all about formation, character, and impact, so you can understand how to lead right now, no matter what your job title is.
Okay, let's unpack this. So let's start where the framework starts, because it immediately throws down this gauntlet about titles.
That really does.
It challenges us to shift our whole perspective from, waiting for status to just recognizing the influence we already have.
Right.
And the foundational question it asks is, it's almost accusatory. It's, where have you been waiting for permission, affirmation, or perfect clarity before you decided to lead?
That is the core accountability check right there. It just shifts the burden of proof completely onto the individual. The framework basically insists that leadership isn't some benefit you get with a promotion. It's a present responsibility you're already accountable for today.
But I wonder if that distinction gets a little muddy for people. If I'm just doing my job well, being responsible, being kind, isn't that just being a good employee?
That's a great question.
How does just exercising influence I already have suddenly qualify as leadership? And the source material really gets into that tension. It defines influence not just as being good, but as intentional action.
Intentional action. Okay.
It pushes us to ask, where do you already have influence? Maybe it's in your family, on a volunteer board, your online community, but you failed to see it as a leadership opportunity.
So you're capable of shaping the environment, but you're choosing to be passive.
You are choosing passivity.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's the difference.
I love the mental test this framework provides for this. It asks, what happens to your leadership when titles, recognition, or authority are removed? What actually remains?
That's the killer question, isn't it? Because it forces you to define leadership purely through stewardship.
Stewardship.
Yeah. If your only currency is your job title, then you don't really have influence. You just have temporary conditional authority.
Yeah.
Stewardship is about how you treat people and resources when no one is watching. That's what's left after the job is gone. That's the real residue of leadership.
Okay, so to make this practical, the framework introduces something called the influence awareness audit. How do you start using this idea right now?
The audit is brilliant. It just asks you to list your 4 core spheres: family, workplace, community, and your digital spaces. Then, for each one, you have to identify one area where you are currently being passive, even though you know you could have a positive impact.
Okay, so give me an example.
Well, take the community sphere. Maybe you see an issue that needs to be addressed, but you think, well, I'm not the head of the neighborhood association.
It's not my job.
Exactly. The audit says that by staying silent, you're actively choosing not to lead. It reveals the calling you are currently underestimating.
Here's where it gets really interesting. So if leadership is about influence, not a title, that moves us straight into the inner work, right? The sources really stress that any sustainable influence has to be built on a foundation of humility and character.
And that humility isn't weakness, it's the operating system for genuine strength.
Which leads directly into the discussion in Chapter 2 about servant leadership.
It does. And they pose a really demanding question here. They ask, how do you personally distinguish between serving and being a servant? And which one is more costly for you?
Oh, that's interesting. Serving versus being a servant.
Right. Serving can be transactional. You complete a task, there's a clear finish line, you probably get some recognition.
But being a servant, that sounds like a total identity shift. That's way more demanding.
Precisely. Being a servant means you adopt an identity where you consistently prioritize the needs and growth of others, often with zero credit, and sometimes at a real personal cost to your time or your ego.
Yeah, you can feel the friction there. Your ambition and ego are naturally going to fight against that.
That's what the sources highlight. They ask, if you choose servanthood, who resists it? And it's often your own internal drive that secretly wants the applause.
And I guess that's why they recommend the hidden acts of service practice, isn't it? As a real test of that ego.
It's the ultimate diagnostic tool. The exercise is to plan 3 acts of hidden service this week. No recognition, no announcement, no credit, period.
Oof.
If you struggle to serve when the applause is guaranteed to be absent, you realize you might just be performing, not actually leading in service.
This internal focus flows right into Chapter 6, which talks about a massive formation risk. The framework asks, if your leadership outpaces your character, what is ultimately at risk?
Everything.
Wow.
A total catastrophic collapse, eventually. When we talk about character, we don't just mean being a nice person.
Right.
We mean the strength of your internal life, your unaddressed wounds, your fears, your reactive patterns. If you're outwardly competent but inwardly fragile, you're building your influence on sand.
And that lack of internal alignment will eventually compromise your external decisions.
Always.
So how do we shore up that foundation, the inner life audit? It sounds necessary, but pretty intense.
It is intense
Mm-hmm.
because it demands total honesty. It asks you to look at 2 things. First, your intentional practices for growth, what they call spiritual disciplines. So for you, this might be any sustained practice of stillness, reflection, journaling, anything that creates space between a stimulus and your response.
Okay. And the second thing?
The second is identifying your emotional triggers. What specific patterns cause you to get defensive, to shut down, or to try and control everything?
The ultimate goal then is closing what they call that formation gap.
Exactly. They summarize the outcome as finding 1 character gap, 1 emotional blind spot, and 1 reflective practice you need to intentionally strengthen. It's all about building deliberate internal resilience.
And that character foundation is what allows us to engage courageously in the real world. So let's move to external action, especially around hope and risk. Chapter 4 makes this fascinating distinction between optimism and hope that I think a lot of us confuse.
Oh, absolutely. Optimism is rooted in favorable circumstances. I feel good because the data is trending up. The hope they're talking about here, they call it biblical hope, is different. It's a conviction that's rooted beyond your circumstances. It's a stubborn belief in a good future, even when the data looks terrible.
And critically, the sources treat hope as a leadership responsibility. It's not just a personality trait.
That's the key. Leaders are responsible for providing that forward conviction.
That conviction is so essential when you find yourself, as Chapter 3 puts it, bringing water to dry places. When an environment, a team, a family is just exhausted, what does bringing water even look like?
Well, when things are dry, leaders usually do 1 of 3 things. They withdraw, they try to control everything, or they're just present. The framework challenges us to introduce hope before we start offering solutions. Bringing water means being present, acknowledging the reality of the dryness, but then influencing the tone by providing that conviction, showing a believable path forward, even if the solution is a long way off.
Now, let's talk about the sharp edge of leadership,
Yeah.
risk. Chapter 5 asks us to confront where we might be confusing caution with cowardice. What risks have you avoided in the name of wisdom that were actually just rooted in personal fear?
It's so easy to rationalize inaction by calling it prudence. That's why this section provides the risk discernment framework. It's designed to fight that self-deception.
So how does it work?
It asks you to identify a pending decision, and then it forces you to examine your motives. What are you actually afraid of losing? Recognition, comfort, financial stability.
And it helps you see the difference between a faith-filled risk and just being reckless.
It does, by
Yeah.
forcing you to assess the cost of not taking the necessary risk. Often the cost of just maintaining the status quo is way higher than the cost of taking action.
And since these actions always happen through people, we have to check the health of our relational operating system. Chapter 7 asks a really pointed question. Do you typically use influence through your temporary authority or through earned trust?
That is the acid test of genuine influence right there. If you're constantly prioritizing efficiency over people, you're leaning on authority. If you stop to cultivate trust, you're building real, lasting influence.
So like sending an urgent email at 10 p.m. and expecting an immediate reply?
Perfect example. That's prioritizing the transaction. A trust-based leader would set boundaries, recognizing that that kind of efficiency often destroys relational health.
So how do we audit that relational health?
They provide a quick relationship audit. You list 5 key relationships under your influence, and then you grade them honestly on 3 things: trust, quality of communication, and frequency of encouragement.
Wow.
It's an immediate gut check. It reveals right away if your leadership is strengthening the people around you or just draining them.
Okay, moving into the final sections, we need to shift from just being busy and productive to actually creating lasting change.
Yes.
Chapter 8 draws this line in the sand. What is the difference between being productive and being transformative? And where had you settled for just transactional outcomes?
It's a crucial distinction. Productive leadership is transactional. It's meeting deadlines, checking boxes. Transformative leadership shapes culture. It changes systems. It alters the foundational beliefs of the people you lead.
So finishing a quarterly report is productive.
Exactly. But overhauling the entire meeting structure to foster real creativity, that's transformative leadership. That's cultural change.
So how do you even begin to initiate that kind of systemic change?
The sources offer tools like the 30-day transformational plan. You pick one sphere, a team, a project, identify one core value you want to reinforce, and then you implement 3 systemic changes that force everyone to live that value out. It's about being intentional with the systems, not just the tasks.
But transformation is exhausting, and the framework knows that. So to sustain this, we have to talk about resilience from Chapter 9.
Right.
It asks, what are the signs of fatigue or discouragement that you have learned to just ignore in yourself?
And ignoring fatigue is not a sign of strength. It's a failure in stewardship of yourself. The source material is so clear on this. Your rhythms of rest directly reflect your fundamental beliefs, your theology of leadership.
How so?
If you believe everything depends solely on you and your energy, your pace will be frantic. It's unsustainable. But if you lead from a place of trust in a greater purpose, you naturally create space for renewal.
That makes the commitment to renewal really actionable. Tell us about the renewal rhythm design exercise.
Oh, this is essential for long-term health. It requires you to consciously design rhythms around 5 areas: rest, reflection, relationship, recreation, and renewal.
And the most critical part
Is committing to at least one protected Sabbath practice each month. And this isn't just taking a break. It's about intentionally protecting time to refill, making sure the character you're building isn't being eroded by an unsustainable pace.
Okay, for the listener who is super organized, who loves frameworks and checklists, the sources provide this powerful final tool. It's called the actionable to-do list exercises. This is like the master level.
It really is. It's the ultimate process for translating all this character and vision into daily steps. It starts with capture and clarify.
The mental inbox dump.
Exactly. You get every single task, concern, and idea out of your head and onto a page. It clears the mental space.
And once it's all externalized, you move to action.
Right. Step 2 is define next actions. Using something they call next action mapping, you rewrite every vague item into a clear executable step. So work on budget becomes pull Q4 report and schedule 30 minutes to review variance.
Super specific.
Then third, you organize and prioritize. You run every task through the priority filter check, asking, does this align with my mission? Can I delegate it? What's the cost of delaying it? You just systematically eliminate things that don't serve your ultimate vision.
And the final piece is ensuring that daily alignment.
That's the review and act stage. You schedule a weekly leadership review to see what actually delivered high leverage versus what was just busy work. And that feeds right into the daily top priority action. Every morning, you pick one high-impact task and you do that before anything else. It saves you from spending your whole day just reacting.
So what does this all mean? I mean, we started by looking past the need for a title, and we've ended up with a whole system for daily meaningful action. The central theme here is that leadership is not a destination. It's a formation process. It's defined by stewardship, courage, character, and service, regardless of your professional position.
The emphasis just shifts completely. It shifts to faithfulness in the small decisions and developing that internal strength. The sources really urge you to consider your legacy, not just what you accomplish, but who you become in the process.
So the goal is to lead faithfully, even if you don't see the results.
Exactly. It's about making sure your everyday decisions align with the kind of leader you truly aspire to be. So when others look at your life, what kind of leadership story will they tell? Based on everything we've talked about today, the audits, the frameworks, the internal challenges, what is one established belief about leadership that you hold? Maybe that it requires a title, or that it means having all the answers. What is one belief you must release right now to live out your calling more fully? That's the immediate challenge to take forward.